This video is about creating an Razor Pages project for a simple database application based on movies. So to start with, you need to find the tutorial, and it is in Module Materials 2021 ASP.main tutorials. If you go in there, you will find there's a link to the tutorial. That's the Microsoft tutorial. Just make sure that you have got version ASP.NET Core 5, because 6 will be coming out shortly, but 5 will do us for now. And I believe everyone has already gone to the classroom link, because when I look in the classroom, I've got all but 4 students have already taken a copy of this empty ASP-Razor-Movies repository. Okay, now I'm going to have to create something similar. So if I go to GitHub and I create a new repository, you don't need to do this, you've got one. I'm going to create a repository based on BNU 550 like yours are, and I'll call it ASP-Razor-MVC I'll put Derek on the end, I think, so it's similar to yours. Okay, I'm going to make it public. Don't need to worry about adding a git ignore, because Microsoft will do that when we put the project under version control. So I've got an empty repository like yours now. Okay, so now we're ready to start in Visual Studio with a new project. So it's going to be C# Windows Web. It's going to be ASP.NET Core Web Application for Razor Pages. Okay, this is where we can use our name. I don't know whether Microsoft allow dashes in names. Let's just try. I'm going to put it in my drive D, but I've got a separate folder for 550 projects. Typically, if you're going to have more than one project, you don't want to place the solution and the project in the same directory, so I normally don't have that tick. But in this particular case, we don't need more than one project, so that will be alright. But when you do your team project, please untick that, and you have a solution as well as a project, because you may want more than one project. Well, Microsoft haven't complained about the dashes. I've never used dashes before, but let's see how we go. Okay, make sure we're in version 5. Right, authentication type. I think in the Microsoft tutorial they don't do that, but please select individual accounts. That'll create the database automatically for you, and will configure it automatically for you. So that'll make things a lot easier if you add the accounts. I know we don't really need them. Just to make this tutorial somewhat easier, we're going to select them. And we really want it to be in HTTPS now. I don't know about enable Razor runtime compilation, but why not? Okay, should look exactly the same as it did before. I see, put an exclamation mark on my dependencies. Yep, it's gone now. Okay, it's finished loading, and obviously the first thing to do is to check it'll run. I think we probably need to move away from II Express and use the project name. Ah, look, Microsoft have replaced the dashes on the bars. Thought they didn't like dashes. Although we've got dashes up there, let's see that it runs. Oh, we've still got this problem. We shouldn't have this problem about the SSL certificate. But I don't know how to get rid of that. Okay, now we don't need a full screen. We're using Bootstrap, so it'll quite happily go down to there. So we're up and running. We have a privacy page. We have a home page. We have a name. We want to get rid of these underbars, and we're up and running. Let's just check with the tutorial and see if there are any differences. So this is the first page of the tutorial, and we're going to be working through up to about stage 4. You can see what the end result is going to look like here. We're going to have a list of movies which we can edit, we can get the details of, and we can delete, and we can search for and filter. Okay, so we've been through these steps. Let's just check them. Creating a new project, going for an ASP.NET project. Doesn't look quite the same. These are not. There's still some differences. I don't think they've updated this precisely like we had it, but never mind. Then we chose a name for the project. They've got the solution and project in the same directory. Okay, we did this. We chose the ASP.NET Core version 5, and we didn't have this screen, so it's not up to date. I don't know what they're playing at. As each version comes out, it is slightly different, but we've done the same thing, but the screens didn't look quite like this. But the end result hopefully is the same. We have now a set of pages including index and privacy, and our CSS and JavaScript are in the www.root folder. Okay, we saw those, but they came up, but I think they'll come up again. Is there anything here which tells us about that? Didn't try IA Express, did we? Let's just see if IA Express makes any difference. Nope, here we go again. So that made no difference. I mean, the last way you can run it is by... We could change browsers, couldn't we? That's the other thing I haven't tried. If we go to web browser Chrome, let's try Edge. So I'm running II Express in Edge. Oh, great. That's even worse. We can continue with, can we continue with unsafe? Yes, so that's even worse. Doesn't offer us a certificate and says it's insecure. Finally I've got Firefox. Not going to make it my default browser. Oh, don't want Norton, thank you. I want my output. That didn't work very well. There is another way of doing it, which is to right click on a page and view it in the browser. going for Firefox again. One more try at Firefox. It's again got a problem with the page being a security risk. Accept the risk and continue. We really need to find a way around this, and we've got it running, but if any student can please find a way that we don't get these warnings and errors all the time, that we have installed a certificate and it's happy, because we've got a security problem here. So any cyber security student, please find a solution of this for me. Okay, then it's going to show us around the folders, which I can do, and that's that step done. So we looked at these folders before in the previous video, so I don't think I will show you around the folders, but what you must do, like we did before, is customize the shared layout page so I can see your name, please. So do that straight away. Remember, we've got the shared layout page where there's the title, ASP-Razors. We can replace the underbars with a space instead. And then down in the footer, here's where you can personalize it and put your name in, please. We don't need the privacy page there. We can take that link to the privacy page out, it's not important. And instead, let's have your name in there pretty quickish, please. Because I need that to prove that you've created this code, or to... Yeah, I need it. I won't bother doing too much with that for the moment. You need to do a bit more of that, particularly on the main index page. Here, I'd like your name, please. Just the title or something like that. Your name, Razor-Movies is the kind of title we need. This is probably a good point under which to get it under version control. It isn't under Git yet. So if you go to File, you can use Add to Source Control. Just bear in mind, if you've mounted Visual Studio recently, that it sometimes by default it isn't under Git, and you need to go into Tools, Options, and change it, the source control, to Git. But I assume you've done this for the last module. Create a Git repository, it's the same thing. Ah, there we go, sorry, there it is. We must push to an existing remote, and it wants the remote URL. That's where you can go into GitHub on the browser. Here's my GitHub on the browser. This is the one I was going to use. So if I go, I guess it's copy that one, isn't it? Copy that one, go back to Visual Studio. I haven't done this that many times, sorry. And paste it into as the remote URL. And then we're going to create a new and push it to the remote. Create and push. If we look at the, oops, it's working, I better not interrupt it. If we look at this Solution Explorer, or we can, yeah, we should see all the lock symbols to show it's under version control. And if we go to the browser and refresh the page, yes, lovely, there's all the code, just been added 20 seconds ago. So we have it now under version control. We're now moving on to part 2, so adding a model. This is the same in both Razor Pages and MVC. Essentially we're adding a POCO class, a plain, old-fashioned CLR object class, which is similar to what you did with the 453 module and the Java module, where you're using console classes. And in both cases, the data models are stored in a models folder. So we're going to add a new folder called models, and then in that models folder we're going to add a class. That class is going to be a movie, something like this, although I'm going to suggest various changes to this. So let's do that. So I'm going to select the project file, right click, add new folder. It's going to be called models. And there we go. Don't know why we've got a data folder there. Oh, that's the migrations. Yes, okay. That's going to be the database context. There's your. That's because we added those accounts. So that's why we've got a data folder with a database context already there. Good. Okay, back to models. Let's add a model, which we will call. It's going to be a new item or a new class. Yep, so we can do a new class. Add a class. And this class is going to be called movie.cs. Okay, nice and simple. And essentially it is going to be largely data. Well, I think for movie it's going to be entirely data. Model classes can have methods, but typically it is largely data because they've got a map to a database table. So as it's going to be a relational database, we must start with a primary key. So it could be movie ID if you want, or just ID. It could be capital I, capital D. I mean, I think probably I probably have capitals, as it's an abbreviation ID, identifier it stands for. And then we want gets and sets. So this is your primary key. Now, you could put a comment there, but in fact there are things called annotations, which we can add to database tables. It was covered later in the thing, but I like to have these data annotations in fairly quickly. So I've added using the component model data annotations. It's not absolutely necessary because Microsoft will take that as the primary key because it's called ID. If you call it something else like movie number, Microsoft won't then make it a primary key unless you put the word key on it. But I'd like you to follow the Microsoft convention. And then we're going to have a string for the title. Okay, I have no problem with that. It's some of the other ones I'm going to change. I'm alright with datetime, may as well just copy this. But I'm going to change some things, don't agree with Microsoft. Okay, so the release date is fine. There is another example of a data annotation. You're just telling it here that this attribute is of type date. It's the genre I'm not happy with. You can probably guess what I'm going to do with it, can you? It's a string, and if we use it as a string, you'll get a text box. Really, this should be a drop-down list. And the way to get a drop-down list is to have add an enumeration. I'll put it inside this same file. So I'm putting an S on the end of it, calling it genres. And you can just simply list them. What should we start with? And so on. You can put a lot more genres in than that. Obviously, if you're doing this as a proper project, the list would be a lot longer than that. So instead of string, we can now use the enumeration. And that will, or should automatically generate for us a drop-down list with these values in. And then finally we got price, which is the decimal. Okay, now I think you saw from database last week that when it comes to database tables, unless you specify a length, your strings will be very long. Now movie titles could be quite long, but I think it probably pay for us to have, say, 60 characters. So that's, you can annotate that title so it's 60 characters. And you can put some validation on price as well if you want. I'll come back to it. Okay, that'll do us. We have a model which we'll build, make sure there are no compilation errors, and obviously it needs a comment. I suggest when you're doing your, oops, no, think of Java, sorry. When you come to your team project, please put individual names here. I'd share these classes out amongst the three of you so that each of you have created some of these classes, because this is one of the key things as part of creating a web application with a database backend, is getting this correct. This should match your ERD diagram exactly. In fact, sometimes you can generate it from your ERD diagram and then go and put the annotations on. Okay, so let's go back to see what Microsoft says next. So the data type attribute is so that you get a date without time, because typically it's a date time and a time, but you don't necessarily want the user to enter time. Okay, so we've now got to the point where the magic is going to happen. This is called scaffolding. So the movie model is scaffolded to produce pages for creating, reading, updating and deleting typical CRUD database operations. So they're asking us first to create a movies folder and then right click on the pages folder and add a new folder called movies. Yeah. Well, in MVC you don't have to do that, it will create the folder for you. I'm surprised we need to do that, but we better. I don't know, I'm tempted to try it without. Let me try it without and see what happens. But we do definitely need to add a new scaffolded item, and that's going to be a Razor page using the entity framework, which gives us the CRUD pages. And we then have to hook it up to a data context class, which we have. I'm going to try it without. Let's just try what happens if I do it the MVC way. So I'm going to the pages, I'm going to right click on pages, add a new scaffolded item. That's going to be a Razor page using the entity framework. So the model class is movie, the data context class is application DB context. Right, okay, it does need the folder. So that's the difference between MVC and Razor pages. Razor pages is not as clever, and we're going to have to cancel all that and create this empty folder in the called movies. So we're going to add a new folder called movies, so that we can now right click on this folder, add scaffolded item, Razor pages with CRUD, model class movie, data context class, that I'm going to add. Okay, so if we look in the movies folder, we should find 5 pages: create, delete, edit, details, and index gives you a list. Right, don't know about I'd like to try that. I'm going to try it. I'm going to run this now and see what happens. I'm going to right click on the index page for movies and view that in a browser. Oh, I don't really like Firefox. Let me change back to my preferred browser. Right. Okay, so it hasn't created the database yet. So it is prompting us that we need what are called data migrations. So I'm going to apply data migrations, which will update the database. In previous versions we would be up and running by now. This has changed since last year, and now it looks like it's asking us to do this manually, whereas before we clicked on the blue button, apply migrations, and it did it for us. Okay, so we're going to have to now use the Package Manager console to add a migration and update the database. So I'll show you that. So we're going to Tools, NuGet Package Manager, Package Manager Console. This is a command-driven system, and let's just check what the commands we need are. There they are: add-migration, update-database. Don't think it's case sensitive. Let's just try. So it's add-migration, and then you've just got to give it a name. This is our first migration, which is going to create our database. So I'm going to call it initial create. And that looks like it's worked. And then we're going to do update. Yes, it wasn't case sensitive. Database. You don't need the capital letters for update and database. Update database. Done. Excellent. Let's try again then. So I'm now going to try and open my page again, my index movies page. Going to view that in the browser, and we've now got action. I'll make it a bit smaller. Okay, there's the register and login, which we don't need, but it helped. I think it helped. I thought I'd taken these underbars out. Okay, but what we have here is what's called an index page, which allows us to create new movies. So if we click on this create new movies, we can put a title in. I have no idea what year it was now. It was quite a few years ago now, wasn't it? I don't know, can't remember. I'd have to look it up. Okay, we haven't got our drop-down list as I was hoping. It used to do that. I think we have to add a bit of code to get that, which is a real shame. But we should be able to put a price in. But without a genre, I think we're going to not be able to create our movie. Yep, a genre field is required, and it's no good just typing it in, because you can't. So that needs sorting. Okay, but the database is up and running, and I can't demonstrate until I sort this genre out now. I'm aware I haven't explained what the scaffolding has done and what data migrations has done. So first of all, the data migrations. What's happened is that the system has created a data migration called create table. and we asked for a data migration called initial create. We have a class, a partial class called initial create, which is based on the migration class, and we're overriding a migration builder, which creates a new table, and that table has these attributes, an ID, a title, and so on. So what we've done is we've created this migration class which will generate SQL. So what's happening is we're going from C#, plain old classes, into this migration, and then into SQL, structured query language, which then modifies the database and puts the primary key as ID. Okay, and then we executed that migration, which produced the SQL, which modified the database. Okay, and that happens every time we do a migration. Some new migration is created, which then creates SQL. Okay, if we look at our index page for movies, we'll see that it is largely HTML, but it is using HTML helpers. This one, we're displaying the name for a particular attribute in the movie, called the title, the release date, the genre, and so on. So it's written that HTML for us with a little bit of C# in there. So that's our index.cshtml file. Okay, now like Razor pages, behind every page or view there is a CS file. So if we look at the CS file, you can see it's called index model. It's a page model, and it contains the database context. So in this case, the onGet method has used the database context to get a list of movies. And unfortunately, Microsoft deviated from their previous naming convention. This should be movies, in my view, because there's more than one movie there. This isn't a single movie, this is a list of movies. I don't understand why Microsoft have made it a singular noun. It should be a plural noun. But essentially that's getting a list of movies and passing them into the page, or the view, the page, which displays them in HTML. And then if we look at the create page, we'll see that it includes a form, and it does include validation, and will produce a validation summary for us. With every field it has got validation on it. We can improve that validation, because I don't think we've added much at the moment, but that's just simply a form with a button down the bottom there. But we have a problem with our genre. We want a drop-down list, and what we've got at the moment, well, it is a select, but it's not working, is it? That needs to work. Okay, what I haven't shown you is you can look at the database. It's an SQL Server database, and you can view the SQL Server Object Explorer. You won't have as many servers as I've got, but you should have a local DB MS SQL server, which you can open, and then open the databases. Again, you won't have as many databases as I've got, because this is over the years, I'm afraid. And I've forgotten something. We have a rather horrible name for our database. Yes, it's used the project name, ASP-Razor-Movies, but then it's added this horrible unique identifier on the end, which we didn't really need. I'll try to correct that the next time I do this in MVC. You can then open the database and look at the tables. Okay, and what you'll probably be surprised by is you have got a number of ASP tables, which is where Microsoft is going to keep its user registration. So forget those, we're only interested in this table. This is our movie table. Again, we can drill down. Go on, drill down and look at the columns. Well, there should be no surprise there. We have an ID, a title, a release date, a genre. Notice the genre is an integer, which can't be null, and a price, which can't be null. The title can be null though, and that's a mistake. We've made a mistake there. We definitely must have a title. That can't be null. So there's a mistake there. Anyway, there's the database. And instead of being called movies, it's called movie. I mean, the reason I don't like that is, if in C# code we now can't have something called a movie. Because as far as ASP.NET is concerned, a movie is a list of movies, not a single movie. I just don't understand the logic there. Anyway, can't do anything. I can do something about that, but I missed my chance. Actually, while we're at it, let me show you where we could have changed it. Here we didn't look at the database context, did we? Okay, and there's the key thing, which we could have put in manually by hand, but I allowed the scaffolding to do it for us, and the scaffolding is going to add this one line, which is to create a database set called movie instead of movies, which we can get and set. Now you'll notice it's putting in the project name all the time, and it doesn't need to. So if you want to simplify some of the code, you can take that out. It should find it without that because it's got a using for it. Okay, so that's your database context. There is simply a database set for every database table, which we've only got one table at the moment. But I'll do that differently next time. I'm going to correct my mistake now and illustrate the power of data migrations. So I made a mistake on the model. So if we go back to the model, we allowed the title to be null. What we should have added here was a required attribute. So we have to have, it has to be non-null, can't be null now, it's required. We didn't have to do it with the others because it was done for us, but again we could have done, to be explicit, we could have had them all required, but typically yes, you'd require a price for a movie, I think. Anyway, I made that change and I'm building. Now that change needs to be reflected in the database. So I'm going to go back to my Package Manager console. I'm going to say add migration. I'm going to call it title required. That's what we've just done. So we're adding a migration called title required, and it'll look through the class and find the differences, and there we go. It's now going to make nullable false for the title. Okay, so now we'll update the database. Okay, and if we look here, we probably need to refresh this. Yep, was it refreshed? Yes. Can't be null now. Yep, it's done it. Okay, so every time you change your models, any of the models change, you have to update the database. And this is so powerful. And before Microsoft introduced this kind of system, it was very difficult to keep the database in sync with the code. This does it for you. Okay, so we're left with this genre, which I introduced because I suggested we'd use an enumeration. Let's sort that out now. So I'm in the create page, and I found the movie genre select drop down list, and I'm going to change it. So I'm going to fold this over, and then I'm going to use another of the what are called ASP helper tags. It's called ASP items, and here we can use the HTML class to get a new select list of genres. Oh, sorry. It's a method, this. Okay, it hasn't found genres. That's because we hasn't got access to the model, has it? Okay, so I've added a using project name .models. Now you can see that down here it has found genres. Okay, so I'm going to run it now, but I'll run it by going to the movies index page. So I'm going to right click and view in browser. Create a new one. There we go, look. We have our drop down list. Okay, so hopefully we can put a title in. Okay, hopefully we can create this, and there we go. We've created our first movie, and let's create another one. Okay, so I'm adding a second movie now, and so on. Okay, now if we look at edit, we'll find it's got a similar fault, which we can cure in a similar way. Now you've got to delete there, but what I want you to do is just add 3 movies to show me you've got your pages working. To check the data is in the database, you can right click on your database table and go to view data. You should then see that there's no time stamp on the dates, it's just dates. You've got your primary key as numbers, and genre, I chose the same genres each time, they're just integers. Okay, so you can check the data there. Finally, you can just improve the look and improve the user interface, because obviously index is not a particularly good name, so a heading for this would be this is a list of movies. New movie. I mean, create news, alright, but I might just have a movie. And rather than this being a link, because it's an A tag, I'd rather turn it into a button, which you can do by using Bootstrap. And then you've got your table, and there's a lot of Bootstrap things you can do with tables. So typically I will do table bordered. What else can we do? Table hover, which allows you to select a row. So that'll just make it look a lot better. And down here again we've got links which can be easily turned into buttons. And use the colour scheme. So typically for edit I would use green, which is the success, button success. For details it's clearly the info button. And finally, for you'd use the danger button for delete. And it'll just make the whole thing look a lot better. I build that. And I can get to my movies page by just putting a / movies. And there we go. We've got a list of movies, add a movie. Oh, something not quite right with those buttons, and we don't need the lines between them now. And you can see the table itself is looking somewhat better. I think I'd prefer that to be more highly coloured, but you can, doesn't matter too much, just get the functions working. That's the key thing. For your project though, there will be marks for a good user interface design. Okay, so that's been rather long as I was expecting. We've still got a problem with the SSL certificate and HTTPS, and we made 1 or 2 mistakes which I'll correct in the next movie. But in the next video, I will go through the MVC version of the same project, and I'll try to do it differently so that we get our database tables with plural names, not singular names. I'll show you how to do that. Okay, I'm stopping there.